So if you've been watching this channel for a while and seen my other videos about bloating, you already know about the hidden causes and you know about the simple fixes. I've gotten an enormous amount of feedback from those two videos. People saying they tried the changes and most felt better. But many viewers, they wanted more. So today, that's exactly what we're doing. Because here's the thing. Most bloating advice on the internet stops simply at avoid dairy or avoid beans. And that's fine as far as that goes. But in my clinic, and I see hundreds of patients in a year of GI complaints, the people who keep coming back are not eating beans at every meal. They're eating things that look completely normal, the things that look healthy. And those are the foods I want to talk about today. Not all bloating is created equal. Some bloating is gas, some is actual distension, a physical expansion of your abdomen, and some is what we call visceral hypersensitivity, which means your gut is simply producing a normal amount of gas, but your nervous system is interpreting that as painful or uncomfortable. The treatment for each one of these is different, and the foods that trigger each one can be completely different as well. Keep this in the back of your mind, and I'll put it all together for you at the end of this video. If this is the first video of mine you've come across, welcome. I'm Dr. Matthew Glover, and I'm a board-certified gastroenterologist in Las Vegas. I do thousands of colonoscopies and endoscopies every year. I run a busy outpatient GI clinic. And the reason I keep making these videos is because I see the same problems coming through my door day after day that could have been caught sooner, managed earlier, and avoided with the right information. So that's what this channel is all about. If you haven't already, consider subscribing and liking the video. It helps this channel grow, and it helps get this information in front of more people who need it. Okay, let's get into it. Number 1, onions and garlic. So this one surprises a lot of people. Onions and garlic are often seen as health foods, and in many ways, they are. They're high in antioxidants, and they've been associated with all sorts of cardiovascular benefits. They're staples of basically every cuisine on earth. But for a significant proportion of the population, particularly people with IBS, and I'd estimate somewhere around 10 to 15% of the general population is IBS, onions and garlic are among the single biggest dietary triggers for bloating that there are. And the reason why is worth understanding. Onions and garlic are extremely high in a type of carbohydrate called fructans. Now, fructans are part of the FODMAP group, and FODMAP stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. That's quite a mouthful. What it really means is a collection of short-chain carbohydrates that the small intestine has difficulty absorbing. So here's what happens. You eat a meal that has a lot of onion or garlic in it. A lot of those fructans pass through your small intestine, only partially absorbed. It gets down to your large intestine, where your gut bacteria absolutely love it. They ferment it, and the byproduct of that fermentation is gas, a lot of gas. And that gas gets trapped, and it stretches the walls of your bowel, and then you feel bloated. Now here's the thing that makes this particularly tricky. You don't need to be eating a full raw onion to have a problem. A lot of people cook down half an onion into pasta sauce, thinking nothing of it, and then spend the evening wondering why they're so uncomfortable. And even more importantly, many people try to avoid onion and garlic, but miss it in restaurant meals, in pre-made sauces, and seasoning packets. It's everywhere. If you've been told your bloating might be FODMAP related and you haven't seen much improvement, this is often why. Now, and this is important, not everyone is sensitive to fructans. Some people can eat garlic all day long and feel absolutely fine. Your gut is unique to you. But if you're someone who constantly bloats after meals and you've never specifically tracked onions and garlic, that's where I would start. Number 2, wheat and certain bread products. Now, before I go any further here, I want to be really precise about something. This is not a gluten is bad for everyone conversation. That is not what I'm saying. Celiac disease is a real, serious autoimmune condition. If you have celiac disease, gluten, a protein found in wheat, barley, and rye, triggers an immune response that damages the lining of your small intestine. That's a different conversation. And if you haven't been tested and you have persistent GI symptoms, talk to your doctor because celiac is very underdiagnosed. What I'm talking about here is separate. It's the fact that wheat is also very high in fructans, the same category we talked about with onions and garlic. And this is where it gets interesting. There's a significant group of people who feel better cutting out bread and wheat, not because of the gluten, but because of the fructans. This matters because they may unnecessarily be avoiding gluten-free products that still contain high FODMAP ingredients, or they may be avoiding things that are actually fine for them. The mechanism is different and the management is different. There's also a separate category, non-celiac gluten sensitivity, where people genuinely do report symptoms from gluten even without celiac disease. The research here is still evolving, and it's far more complicated than the internet makes it sound, but it's real for a subset of people. What I see in my clinic is this. People go gluten-free, feel better, and attribute it to the gluten, when actually what happened is that they dramatically reduced their fructan load, and that's what made the difference. The distinction matters for figuring out where to go next. The bread piece is also worth talking about specifically. Highly processed white bread has a different fermentation profile than a traditionally fermented sourdough, for example. Sourdough made with a long, slow fermentation process can actually be lower in FODMAPs because the fermentation breaks down a lot of those fructans before the bread even gets to your gut. So some people who think they can't tolerate bread can actually tolerate a properly made sourdough just fine. Number 3, dairy, but not for the reasons you think. So dairy comes up constantly with bloating. I stopped drinking milk and I feel so much better. And for a lot of people, that's completely true. But the reasons are more specific than most people realize, and getting precise about it actually matters for your diet. Lactose intolerance is incredibly common, and I mean that globally. Around 65 to 70% of the world's population has some degree of reduced ability to digest lactose after childhood. In certain populations, particularly East Asian, West African, and Hispanic populations, that figure is even higher, often above 80 to 90%. Now, lactose is the natural sugar found in milk and most dairy products. When you eat it, an enzyme called lactase in the lining of your small intestine is supposed to break it down into glucose and galactose, which are then absorbed. But if your lactase activity is low, which is the natural state for most adult humans, by the way, a lot of that lactose passes through undigested. It gets through your large intestine, gut bacteria ferment it, you get gas, you get bloating, sometimes cramping, sometimes diarrhea. But it's actually more nuanced, and here's where it gets complicated. Lactose content varies enormously between dairy products. A glass of whole milk has a lot of lactose. Hard-aged cheeses like cheddar, Parmesan, Swiss have almost none because the lactose is consumed during the fermentation process. Greek yogurt has less than regular yogurt because a lot of the whey is removed. Butter is almost entirely fat with very little lactose. So a lot of people go dairy-free and feel better, but they could have actually just been strategic about which dairy products they choose. And that matters because dairy, particularly fermented dairy, carries significant nutritional benefits for the gut health, for bone density, and protein intake. There's one more thing I want to flag here. If you develop new lactose intolerance as an adult, particularly after a GI infection, after a course of antibiotics, or after a period of GI illness, that can sometimes be only temporary. The lactase enzyme in your small intestine can be reduced temporarily during intestinal inflammation and take some time to recover. So don't write off dairy permanently without checking back after your gut has had a chance to heal. Number 4, high fiber vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage. So here's the one that genuinely baffles people. They've been told to eat more vegetables. They're doing everything right, and they've been more bloated than ever. Welcome to the cruciferous vegetable problem. Broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, these are among the most nutritionally dense foods on the planet. High in fiber, high in vitamin C and K. They also contain compounds like sulforaphane that have been studied for potential cancer protective properties. From a nutritional standpoint, these are the foods you absolutely want in your diet. But they are also extremely high in fermentable fibers and certain sugars, including a sugar called raffinose, that the human small intestine simply cannot digest. It passes through completely intact until it reaches the colon, where the bacteria go to work on it and produce significant amounts of hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and sometimes methane gas. And it's not just that these vegetables produce gas, it's the type of gas and the speed at which it's produced. Some people have gut bacteria that are particularly efficient at fermenting these fibers, and they produce gas very rapidly, which means significant distension in a short amount of time. Now, here's the practical piece. Cooking method matters more than most people realize. Raw cruciferous vegetables ferment much more aggressively than cooked ones, because cooking partially breaks down those cell walls and the fermentable compounds. If you're eating raw broccoli in a salad or cauliflower in its raw form and you're prone to bloating, that's going to be a very different experience from roasted broccoli. Steam or roast these vegetables first. It won't eliminate the gas completely, but it significantly reduces it for most people. Portion size matters too. A small amount of cooked cauliflower, many people can tolerate that without any real issue. Half a head of raw cauliflower in a salad, for someone with a sensitive gut, that can be a real problem. Number 5, sugar alcohols, and they're hiding in places you'd never expect. So this is the one that most people have never heard of, and it's the one I most often find is the hidden culprit when patients come into me and say, I've changed my diet, I've cut out the obvious stuff, and I'm still bloated. Sugar alcohols, the main ones to know, sorbitol, mannitol, xylitol, and erythritol. These are used as low-calorie sweeteners in a huge range of products. And here's why they cause bloating. The alcohol part of the name doesn't mean they contain ethanol. It means they have a specific chemical structure, and that structure means the small intestine absorbs them very poorly. Some of them almost not at all. They pass through largely intact and hit the colon, where gut bacteria ferment them with great enthusiasm. The result is gas, bloating, distension, and often loose stools or diarrhea as well. Now, why does this catch so many people off guard? Because sugar alcohols are found primarily in products that are marketed as healthy. Sugar-free gum, keto-friendly protein bars, low-carb snacks, diet chocolates, sugar-free mints, certain natural nut butter spreads with no added sugar, even some fiber supplements. I had a patient recently, and I see this pattern regularly, who was trying to eat well, cut out sugar, switch to sugar-free alternatives, and their bloating got significantly worse. They couldn't understand why. They were doing everything right. The culprit was the sugar-free protein bars and the gum they were chewing throughout the day, both loaded with sorbitol. Now here's one thing worth knowing. Erythritol is generally better tolerated than the others because it is actually absorbed to a greater degree in the intestine before reaching the colon. So if you're using low-calorie sweeteners, erythritol tends to be the least problematic, but individual tolerance still varies quite a bit. The label read on this one is important. Look for anything ending in "all" in the ingredients list. If you're seeing sorbitol, xylitol, or any "all" and you're chronically bloated, that's worth a very serious look. Now let me bring this all together. So 5 foods: onions and garlic, packed with fructans that tend to feed colonic bacteria and drive gas production. Wheat, again, often the fructan issue rather than the gluten itself, but the nuances matter. Dairy, usually lactulose, and specifically which dairy products you're eating makes a big difference. Cruciferous vegetables, fermentable fiber and raffinose, and cooking method changes everything. And sugar alcohols, hidden in a lot of products marketed as healthy and a very common overlooked culprit. Now, back to what I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Not all bloating is coming from the same place. Some of you have a genuine gas-producing situation, a FODMAP sensitivity, a lactose problem, a sugar alcohol overload, and dietary changes are going to make a significant difference for you. Some of you have visceral hypersensitivity as part of IBS, where your gut is interpreting normal amounts of gas as pain and pressure, And in those cases, the food changes may help some, but their bigger piece is actually the gut-brain axis, stress, sleep, and how your nervous system is regulating your gut. That's a whole separate video for another time. And some of you may be noticing that your bloating is persistent, that it's getting progressively worse, that it's often accompanied by other symptoms, changes in bowel habits, blood in your stool, unintentional weight loss, or bloating and abdominal distension that is severe and doesn't seem to improve at all. In those cases, please don't manage this with dietary adjustments. Those symptoms warrant a conversation with your doctor. They warrant a proper evaluation, and earlier is always better. Now, one more practical piece before I wrap up. If you're trying to figure out which of these is driving your symptoms, I always recommend a structured elimination approach rather than cutting out everything at once. Because if you eliminate 5 things simultaneously and you feel better, you have no idea which one was the problem, and you may be unnecessarily restricting your diet long term. Work with a dietitian if you can, one who is specifically trained in low FODMAP diets. The FODMAP elimination and reintroduction protocol is actually one of the best evidenced dietary interventions we have in GI medicine. It works when done properly. Start with one category. Give it 2 to 3 weeks. Reintroduce it. See what happens. That process will tell you something actually useful rather than just making your diet smaller and smaller until you're eating 3 foods. The goal is always the smallest dietary restriction that controls your symptoms, not the most restrictive diet you can tolerate. If you've watched this video and you're thinking, I've tried all of this, the diet stuff doesn't seem to be the answer, I still can't get on top of this, then it's time to come in and see a gastroenterologist. Because there are diagnostic tools we have, breath tests for lactulose and SIBO, stool tests, endoscopy when appropriate, that can tell you objectively what's going on rather than continuing to guess. If you found this helpful, please subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the like button. It helps the channel more than most people realize. And check out the 2 earlier videos in this series if you haven't seen them already. Why you're bloated, 5 simple fixes that actually help, and why you're still bloated, 6 hidden causes that most doctors miss. Links are in the description. I will see you in the next one.